Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Are we starting? Oh. Good. So, guys, thanks so much for coming and spending this probably hour with us. We're going to start with a few questions, but very quickly, we'd like to hear any questions that you have, and we're going to try and answer them. I want to thank Noam for coming and joining me in Abu Dhabi for a day. We made him work a little bit, 24 hours, 48 meetings. But his perspective is so important. I think he'll present himself. But as you know, he's the former legendary CEO of Waze. Took it from 2,000 users to 150 million. And maybe we'll start with that, Noam. How did you overcome the cold start? How do you take a startup from 2,000 people to 150 million? Tell us a little bit about this journey.
Oh, it's very simple. You do what? First of all, thank you everyone for your time today. I know we met a lot of people and you made time for us last minute, so thank you. The cold start problem deals the question of usually community or network effects, right? You come into a room, there's no one there, you leave, so there's no one there. So how do you create things that will happen? And there isn't an answer or a formula. There's a great book by Andrew Chen, if you want, that just came out. It's actually called The Cold Start Problem. So I'd recommend. The recent guy, yeah. Who's like a growth expert. At Waze, we over time discovered that there's a kind of a flow to how things work for an area to become active. So the first thing we need is a map, right? If there's no map, then obviously we can't navigate or do anything. And our maps were built by community members. And so we needed a very small number of very committed people to come and work with us to build these maps. And these people are relatively not easy to find, but they're possible to find. The next step, we needed a group of early adopters who would drive around with the app, although we were not bringing any value. But we needed to collect data from their phones. Based on how they were driving, we collected GPS data, we knew turns, directions, speeds, all this information that we needed. But the big challenge that we had is that there was zero value, because our map was still pretty terrible at this stage, and we would at best get you lost. And so what we did is we began gamifying the system. We said, okay, we can't bring value, or traditional value, utility. Let's try and bring a different value of entertainment. And so what we did is we'd cover whatever was there of the map with these virtual dots. And if you were a Waze user and you were the first user to drive on the road, your avatar would turn into a Pac-Man, a road muncher. We got a cease and desist letter from that company. But the Pac-Man would begin eating these dots as you're driving, and a bar would start racking up points. And people loved it. Obviously not everyone, or very few people, but enough people loved it that they would begin driving around. And of course, the highways get eaten very quickly, so it gets harder and harder to find points. You gotta go further and further away from the highway to find these little streets where there's some points. So that was the first step. The second step that we ran into was how do you get people to drive the same place multiple times? Because obviously, intersections, GPS is noisy data, we need multiple drive-throughs. And so we created these virtual goods. So imagine you're driving in the highway and you're looking at your navigation map and you see a cherry sitting at the intersection off the highway. Cherry. Drive off the highway, you drive over the cherry, bing, you got 200 points. And we placed the cherries algorithmically where we needed data. And each cherry had, we could refresh them at a certain rate. And so with these games, we got people to begin driving more and more, collected more and more data. The app got better and better to the point where people started using it for utility, and the rest is history.
Interesting story. I never heard it before.
I'll show you some screenshots afterwards.
Okay, no, that's amazing. So Ibrahim, we're as investors, we're all trying to find them. Exactly. Where do we find them? Do you have any insights on? Can you actually spot early in the game those players or those founders that you think are going to create this unbelievable impact and grow something to 150 million? Are there any from your? Do you have any example? Do you have any insights of? Even, in a hindsight of, hey, you know what? This characteristic, if this exists, there's a chance for this to explode.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's wonderful to have you here in Abu Dhabi. Welcome to Abu Dhabi. You know, I spend most of my day and at night dreaming about finding people like you. So it's a real honor to have you here.
Thank you.
I mean, you created a big industry, and you know, many of us here, I'm sure, we're users of your application for many years. I still wonder why you sold to Google.
Well,
but we can have that discussion.
Other discussion.
So to answer Ori's question, it's very hard, and you know, let me give you a couple of examples. I mean, I think it's this combination of understanding markets, understanding technology, but really understanding people. And what's the story of the founder? What ultimately led the founder to do this? There's some founders here that we've backed that we're very proud of. But what's the story that ultimately led the founder to have this very unique, special, differentiated insight that gives that founder that advantage? We backed a company in San Francisco called Brex. I'm sure, who's heard of Brex? So Enrique is, I mean, he was a young kid who actually hacked the first iPhone. Remember back then, sort of the iPhone put out this competition and said if you can hack it. He was one of the first hackers that hacked the iPhone. Then he went to Stanford. He was at Stanford for about 6 months, then he got bored. Stanford computer science program, then he got bored. Well, how do you get bored at Stanford? And then he said, listen, I think there's a problem here. All these various companies around the world are really becoming technology companies and internet companies, and banks as we know them just cannot serve internet companies, so I'm going to create the first full stack technology-based bank. And when I first met him, he was like 25 or 24 or 23. I think he's like 26 now. But I give this example because you know, he's the kind of founder that when you first meet, your first impression is this kid has no idea what he's talking about. He wants to ultimately really threaten the viability of the JP Morgans and the Bank of Americas and Wells Fargo, or here some of these big banks. But once you spend time with him, and you understand his vision, and you understand how he's thinking about building his teams, and you understand about what are the steps he's going to take to really start getting some consumers and some customers. Well, his strategy was, I'm going to start going after startups who really need debit cards. And if I can do that, then I can potentially get my first cohorts. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to put billboards all over San Francisco. Well, billboards are very expensive. Why would you do that? Yes, it's expensive. But let me explain to you why, if I do this billboard, then my cost of acquisition over quite some time could be actually very effective. So he's got this vision, but then he's got all these creative ways where he's going to go and crack the market. And then he's willing to listen. You engage with him, he's learning, he's listening, he's getting the feedback. It's like, that's a very good point, let me go think about it, then he'll respond to you in a couple of days. So we look for all these signals, whether that founder is in San Francisco, or they're in Israel, or they're here in Abu Dhabi. We look for all these signals that we believe could potentially, aligned with market trends, aligned with secular shifts, could potentially create a very special company. Most of the time we get it wrong. And this is the thing about investors. Investors have to do two things. Number one is you have to come to terms that every time you make an investment, you're overpaying for it. You're overpaying for it. Every single venture capital deal, you're overpaying for it. And you have to come to terms with another very important fact, which is the one that ultimately wins, you've underestimated how big it will win. Like this example right here. And that's the life we live. That's sort of what we're always looking for. These are the founders that ultimately can, am I comfortable overpaying for this founder? And ultimately you actually, hopefully, and pray and with a lot of hard work, you know, one of these companies is going to reward you much bigger than you've ever anticipated. And that's the beauty of the business we're in.
So let me ask you both a question, because in many ways you're both operators and founders as well as investors. You know, you're an investor, but you're building the best tech, investor in the world, and you were an operator, and now you invest a lot in startups. Let's talk about kind of a little bit of a soft issue, culture. How important do you think is culture in a company? Are you looking for that? When you look at an entrepreneur, do you think he needs to build a certain culture? Are you looking for certain mechanics in the culture? How important is that? We all look at market size, total addressable market, is it important, technology, depth of technology knowledge, but let's talk about culture a little bit. What do you think?
Do you want to start now?
Okay.
And what is culture when you define it in your head?
First of all, I'd say that the number one thing that kills companies is culture. It's founders fighting, it's teams fighting, it's politicization of an organization. And think about a startup, you don't have time for this. If you're a large corporation, you can afford to have politics. As a startup, you have no time. You've got a gun to your head, which is your burn rate. You've got to run quickly, and you're fighting the world. You can't have to look backwards at your team to see if someone's stabbing you in the back. And by the way, I think the best book on culture is Ben Horowitz's book, What You Do Is Who You Are. And it's a good book because it doesn't talk about tech. It talks about culture from Genghis Khan and all kinds of parts of the world, other parts of the world. But the essence is what the founders do is the culture. Now that becomes a problem when you scale. There's a different question of how do you scale culture, right? But when you're starting out and you're, let's say, sub 50 people, so everyone knows each other and the founders know most people or all the people in the company. What they do is going to determine how everyone acts. Not what they say, not what's written on the wall, not what's in the PowerPoint presentation, not what the HR manager tells everyone. It's what they actually do. If you say that being on time is important, but you're late, everyone's going to be late. Everyone's going to get what you said. If you say transparency is important and you lie, okay, everyone's going to lie in the organization. And the founders have a very important role that's way beyond the functional role. And one of those really is setting the culture. The culture really determines if you're a bunch of individuals or if you're a team. There are magical things that happen with a well-performing team. Okay? And it goes the other way around. There are terrible things that happen in a non-performing team. I like to say that if a small and focused team can't do something, it can't be done. Okay? More people are not going to help. Okay? But that means you have to have the right people. They have to be focused. They have to be motivated. And that's the output of culture, as far kind of the way I look at it. And I look at culture a little bit like brand. Brand is very much a promise, and your product has to live up to that promise every day. As a founder, when you get up in front of your company and you say, we're going to do this and this, we care about this and this, we're not going to do this and this, okay? You're making commitments to your team. And every time you live up to those commitments, you've built trust. Okay? And that trust is what's going to help people not look behind them, but run forward. Every time you've committed to something and did something else, people are going to start looking behind them, and next thing you know, the whole org is going all over the place.
That is another great book, by the way. Ben Horowitz, one of my favorite books.
One of my favorite as well.
Yeah. So I can't agree more. I start with that. We obviously have a big role in building cultures. So we do two things. I run a team of about 50 people around the world in San Francisco and London, here in Abu Dhabi. Obviously, we focus on culture too, but we also do look for culture. I mean, that's a very, very important lens. So let me start with that because that's really the much more interesting part than what we do. But I'll give you one example of things that I do. It's very, very hard for early stage founders to focus on building the product because all you're focused on is how do I get, again, the product out, get customers, make sure I have enough cash to get me to the next round. Continue to evolve the product, get enough customers to get to the next round. But I do agree with you that inherent as a part of that journey, it's really important to focus on what are the principles. Principles. Ray Dalio wrote a book called Principles, which is also very important. If you have not read that book, you should read that book. He built one of the largest investment firms in the world back then. So to answer your question, what is culture? I believe it's principles. What are the set of virtues that guide your decisions? What are the set of virtues that ultimately enable the team to all march in the right direction? It doesn't mean that you don't have controversial discussions or we don't disagree on many things, but are we all heading in the same direction? So how do we test for that? I'll tell you a few questions that I ask founders, and one question I ask is, if I was to walk into Hala, if I was to walk into your office, the senior team at Hala, how do they behave? What makes a person to become a senior executive or a head of product or a head of engineering or a head of marketing at Hala? I often ask that question to founders that we evaluate. And it helps us determine how that founder is actually thinking about the kind of people they want to recruit and the culture they want to build and the people they want to mentor. It goes deep into the founder's characteristic and what he's looking for in people. So we ultimately ask these sort of questions to determine how that founder is thinking about the environment and the company for the long run. For us, as an investment firm, I'll give you today, everybody here should know this. We are in a market contraction right now. We are in a very serious market contraction. Our public portfolio is down 60% from December 31st till today. So how do we behave as a team during very difficult times like this? What are the questions we're asking each other? Is this when potentially some members of the team will say, that's not my deal and that's your deal, or hey, that's your product and that's my product? Or is it around how do we step up and support each other during this difficult? And that's much easier said than done, but ultimately that level of dialogue and the engagement is really very important in determining the culture of the firm and where it's going. I've developed a set of principles for my team. We have three main ones, three main principles, and everything emanates from that. Number one is we are builders. As investors, we are builders. We work with our founders, and we wake up every day willing the founders to success. How do we make sure we're thinking about our founders' success? The second one is we are learners, which is we wake up again every day asking ourselves, what can we learn? How do we support each other? How do we teach each other? How do we learn from each other? Because this is a business about being curious all the time, always being curious. And last but not least is we win together. It's not my company versus your company, or it's our portfolio together, collectively. It's thinking together. This is how Sequoia's built it. This is how Andreessen's built it. This is how General Catalyst has built it. It's about an institution winning together. Success is never alone. It's always communal. Success, when Waze was successful, it's about a team coming together. And I think ultimately, founders that don't understand deeply how important winning together, they actually don't get there.
Oh, no, and I completely agree with you guys, and I think that it raises a few questions, and especially about fundraising, right? So I think Noam and I talk a lot about this, and is everybody says, well, a dollar is green, a dollar is a dollar, a dollar is a dollar. That's, as founders, it's not the case. I mean, in many ways, you need to choose your investors as well, because this is a long-term partnership, right? So now, for example, when you look at startups, how do you choose the right investors, right? And for investors, we always say that the best founders, you actually have to pitch them. They don't pitch you. If you want to invest in their company, you have to pitch them. So kind of two questions for you, Ibrahim. How do you persuade the best founders out there that they will take your money in many ways because you can add value? And then Noam, on your side, how do you choose someone that you believe is a good investor? And we've all gone through troubles. A few examples would be great.
He's setting me up for that answer. Please.
Well, listen, it's also a sales pitch for us. Okay, well, Mubadala, you can have any founder you want. No, it's not. It's a sales pitch for us. Every interaction is an opportunity to sell our brand, just like it's an opportunity for that founder to sell. And there's got to be chemistry. There has to be timing and energy. It's got to come together in the right way. Listen, we've made many mistakes. We've passed on some great companies. We always said, hey, the valuation's too high. Like dogmatic about valuation. Oh, valuation's too high, we'll just pass. And that was a big mistake in one instance. Or, we passed on, I'll give you an example. We passed on Klarna about 3 years ago. That's we don't have enough time to do the work, and they need to close in a week. So you have these like dogmatic mindsets that ultimately, if you're just willing to be a little bit more flexible, it would make a big difference. So to specifically answer your question, I wanted to make that point that we make mistakes with founders, and that's okay, just a part of, but ultimately so much has to come together for it to work. The timing has to work. Are we looking at this kind of sector? Are we interested in these kind of companies? Are we complementing this founder's, his or hers investor syndicate? But we do a lot of selling. I mean, just like founders sell us a dream, I also sell a dream. I say, hey, I can invest as little as $1 million and as much as $500 million in your startup. And I'll put the weight of Mubadala behind you. And some founders oh wow, some founders are not that intrigued. And then I'll get a sense if that founder is intrigued by that statement or not. And then you'll have to go and keep doing selling. So it's also an art for us as investors to also read and understand where that founder is in that capital raising process and what is it that we have to say and do. And to your point, then you have to follow up. Then it's really about delivering on what you're saying. Following up with, here's the doors I can open, here's the work I'm going to do, here's my process, here's the people on it, here's what I think you should. There's got to be a real active engagement. And we're not perfect. Again, a lot of times we've missed some very, very important founders, and there's sometimes we made it successful. I have this belief that we as investors make a decision to invest in the first hour. And then everything we do is just aimed at confirming this bias. So it's really just because we're all human, it happens just in that first hour saying, I like this person, and that's it. Everything, all the negative signals we tend to ignore. So what we have to do also as investors, make sure we go through this process of checking this bias all the time, and having a discussion about it. Always saying, what am I missing? What's going to go wrong? What could it be? And it's never black and white. It's gray world, and you just have to make a decision. Sometimes investors take forever, and you're never going to win companies that way. And sometimes investors make very, very quick decisions, and you'll make some mistakes, and that's just a part of the art.
Yeah, and by the way, both sides talk. Investors talk with each other and ask about founders. Hey, should I invest? Should I invest? Best founders talk with each other as well. Say, should I take him as an investor? Did he help you? Was he a pain in the ass in the board? Will he follow up? Is it good? Is it bad? What does it do to my brand? So I mean, if you have those both networks that talk to each other, and I think that's where you create value. And if you can build your name, I think the best investors are the ones that other founders tell you should really take his money because it's much more than money. You have a partnership there. And by the way, on the other side as well, Noam will tell you that you should help your co-founders say, actually, you shouldn't take money from this guy because it's going to be hell. I'm passing it on to you.
Now let me tell you how it's really works.
How much money did you raise for Wave?
Altogether, 38 million. It was a different world.
Yeah, like 380.
It was in the days when $1 billion was a lot of money. Not like today, where everyone's $1 billion. The first thing I'd like to say is that your investor is the only thing you're not going to be able to change in your company. Once the investor's on your cap table, you cannot get rid of them. Yes, there are stories specifically with that, but assume you cannot. You can get rid of your co-founder. You can get rid of any employee. You can get rid of a partner or a customer. Your investor, you're not going to be able to. And so this is one of the most important decisions you're going to make in terms of who you take money from, in terms of, first of all, your quality of life. Right, I think there should be a Hippocratic oath for investors that first do no harm, right? And second is I would recommend having very, very low expectations. That's really good for this type of relationship, okay? But I see a lot of founders that get caught up in this idea that I only need to raise the next $2 million and everything will work out. It doesn't really matter who, because they excel, then it's all gonna work. And it just never doesn't work that way, okay? That mistake of, I'll just take their money and run and then it'll be okay, is just wrong. And I had, a lot of founders like to say they've had the worst investors, and I'm willing to go head to head with each one of them. And I think I did. But a big part of why we sold Waze was our investors. Our board relationships were terrible. Quality of life was terrible. And again, you can't really get rid of them. Yeah, we diluted them, we did this, that, the other, but you can't really get rid of them. And at the end of the day, you go to work every day, so excited about your product, right? What are you going to be spending your emotional energy on? Is it about the feature, the product, the customer, the partner, or is it going to be about that comment that board member made to you that's still stinging in your ear?
Yeah.
And so the first thing I would say is, do not underestimate this. Do not take money from the wrong person. It doesn't mean you can only take money from these 3 people, right? But the most important thing is to do your due diligence. And there are 2 aspects. There's the fund, which is less important than the partner. And when you want to do due diligence on a partner, you want to speak to companies they've invested in where it ended badly. Don't listen to any founder or company that they're currently sit on their board, because that's not worth anything. And when it finished well, when the company went well, usually everyone's happy. Find the company that didn't end well, where they had to shut it down, or they ended up selling it for nothing, and where they went through the dark valley of death. And how was the investor there? Because that's really when you see the quality of the person. Who's with you when it's hard, right? Who's there for you? And a lot of times all you need is someone just to listen to you, right? Because you live your company 24 hours a day. They spend 3 minutes on it, right? Second thing is, you want someone who's been there. Been there as an investor. It's better as an investor than as a founder, but someone who's seen what success looks like. People that read about success on TechCrunch have this idea that, well, for them it was easy. All they did was turn on the product and it went through the roof. And that doesn't exist anywhere. Okay? Ask anyone who's been there, no one had it that way. Except some people who like to rewrite history. It's always hard. You're always fighting. It never works the way that you want. It's always 10 times more expensive and more difficult than you thought, right? So you need a partner with you, just like the team, right? You said that you need that culture. You need someone that's aligned with you, that's looking for the good of the company. Not for the good of their fund, in that sense. Not for the good of their LPs, right? Not for the good of the other company, but really is dedicated for your success. You as a founder, you have one product. This is your life, right? That's it. And so the question is this person helping or hindering my one baby? So don't underestimate it. If you cannot raise money except from that one asshole, the problem is with you. Go back to the drawing board, try to figure out what you're doing wrong, because it's not that they're all idiots and you're the only one that gets it. And there are millions of funds today, and if they're all telling you the wrong thing, it's a mistake. And I would tell you, it's better to shut down the wrong company early than to get money and run. And I made this mistake myself. That's why I allow myself. Company before Waze, I went to it for all the wrong reasons. And I had the 2 worst years of my life running a company that I knew was wrong, but I'd already taken money from people. I couldn't leave. I was the CEO. Like, what am I going to do? It's the worst thing. I wish I had shut it down early and not taking the money. So really look at this as that crucial a decision, as a life or death decision, because it is. At the same time, if you get the right investor, being the CEO of a company is extremely lonely. You're constantly stuck between trying to tell a story, trying to pretend things are going well. They say founders sleep like babies. They wake up every hour and cry. So like you're constantly in that, and there are very few people you can really open up with. Now, you can't really open up to an investor. There's still different sides of the fence, but it's someone that has seen other companies, someone that has seen this happen before, someone that can give you perspective. You think this is bad? You should have seen what happened in Facebook in the first month. Like that perspective. Everyone thinks that their company's a mess, right? Oh, it's terrible. The other company's doing great, but my company's a mess. No, every company's a mess. Humans are a mess, and so a company's made of humans. The company's going to be a mess, right? So you need that perspective, and that's one thing very unique that investors can bring to the table that no one else can. Right? And no matter how much TechCrunch you read, if you haven't sat there and been through it, it's not going to help. Last point around investors, don't forget that they have their own politics. That investor is not a one-person show. He or she has other partners, and they have LPs, and there's a whole politic going on within the firm that is not, you're just not exposed to, but it's always there. And so you need to think strategically, how do you make your investor a hero in their fund? On Monday, on the investing meeting, all of the partners are there. How do you make them look like a hero? And you're going to need them and the fund with you for your next round as well, right? And that's a different way of thinking about it. I see a lot of founders that are thinking about, like, this person, they love me, so it's okay. It doesn't matter if they love you, if the firm hates you, right? Or if the firm hates them, right? And this is, I would say, some of the simplest things that I always tell founders, and a lot of them don't listen to me, and I think it's a mistake. Something I found very helpful. Every month, write a monthly report. Now, don't write it for the investors. Write it for yourself. That's once a month that you're going to sit down and you're going to say, what did I do this month? And firstly, you're going to discover you're not so much of a mess. Wow, we did all this stuff. Because every day you're dealing with what's not working, right? So suddenly you get perspective. You send that to everyone in the company. So once a month, everyone in the company is on the same page. Same page that you are, and the same page that your board is. That same report goes to your board. And it'll save you a lot of hassle, but more than that, don't forget that your investor needs tools to update their partners about what's going on. So make it easy for them. Just like with a customer, right? You want to chew everything up for the customer so the decision's easy. Same thing with the investor. You've got great things going on in your company. How do you communicate them is super important to everyone.
So I want to spend the next 5 minutes asking another couple of questions, and maybe we open it up for questions to the audiences. So 2 things. I think we met quite a lot of startups in the last 24 hours. One theme that came back again and again is expansion, scale. I think every single startup that we saw that had more than 100 customers, the next phrase was, and now we're going into Saudi. So I think, like, the threshold is 100 customers, and you already guys are going to Saudi. And I wanted to ask you about 2 things. Focus, growth. Can you grow in one market and then go to the other? Do you need to go wide and scale very quickly? And second, maybe you, Ibrahim, is as a message to the local community as well is, are you only looking for stuff that goes global? Or if you're really, really good in one market, that is also a thesis that actually works. Because I feel, and I'm just kind of giving this as a little bit of an aid to the community here as well, is I think that people are a little bit confused. They think that if they don't go wide very quickly, no investor wants them. And is it really, quantity or quality, or does quality turns into quantity, or quantity turns into quality? So Noam, let's start, and then let's hear. And then I want to talk a little bit about Hub 71, and one last question, and we'll pass it on to you guys.
So I think there are a lot of parallels between Israel and the UAE, in the sense that these are very small countries that don't really have a market when you're thinking about large numbers, right? And the question becomes then, why are you launching in your home market? And that's a question you need to ask yourself very, very carefully. Why are you even doing it? If you're doing something that's software only, that's global, that's a different story, and you could argue if this is the right place or the wrong place to do that. But if you're building something for the region, you're solving a problem in the region, beta testing it in the UAE, is that an indication of what's going to happen in Saudi or in Egypt or somewhere else? Right? Are the market dynamics, the infrastructure, the politics, the currency, what is similar and what is different? And I think one of the challenges you see with a lot of Israeli companies is that they end up building a product for the Israeli market, just because they're testing it there. And you go to America, every niche is a multi-billion-dollar industry with hundreds of competitors. You go to Israel, half the market is one company. It's like it's a different model. And so it's very, very important to be clear about why you're going in. At Waze, we started in Israel basically to test the technology that we could build it. The next step was the US. Because we knew if we're not successful in the US, we're not going to be successful anywhere. And it doesn't really matter. Okay? We had one brilliant investor who tried to convince us to go to either Singapore or Romania, because they're small countries like Israel. Right? But we're not building for small countries, we're building for the world. Same thing here. If you're building for the region, what is it here that's going to happen? By the way, you could be building for the UAE. You can build a huge business just in the UAE, right? But it's a different type of business, right? So that clarity, that focus of mission and a vision is crucial when you're evaluating how much resources to spend in a local market. One of the problems with the local market is that all your friends and family are here. And so when something doesn't work, they tell you. And so the engineer feels embarrassed, so they fix it. But maybe that bug doesn't really matter for your core market that you're going for. I think we discussed with some of you, I see a lot of parallels between what's going on here in the region and where kind of Latin America was 8 years ago, right? And on a lot of different levels. But at the time, remember, I was being asked, well, why aren't there any unicorns here? And why aren't there any global companies here? And my answer was, look, you have 800 million Spanish speakers here. Why are you trying to go for 300 million Americans? And it was kind of a taken back. You have real problems in the region that only you understand, that are unique to your region. You've got unique politics and currencies and a million other things, which means no American can come to your region because you understand that. And so that's another level of question. Are you building for your region? In which case, what are your advantages? Or are you building globally? And is this the right place to build from? So I think that clarity is crucial.
And there's also a lot of operational risk in scaling too fast. You have to get it right before you go.
And that's a crucial thing. At this stage, for all the companies here, the last thing you should be thinking about is scale. Your problem is product market fit. Your problem is to build something that someone wants and either pays for. Right? That's your number one problem. But as you're building it, you have to be thinking about the next step and the next 10 steps, right? Let's assume it works. If you don't assume it works, then don't do it, right? But you're assuming it's going to work, right? Will whatever works actually be able to scale in other places? Am I really learning? You know, we had a discussion about cities, you know, in the UAE. They don't represent cities in America or in Europe. You can't look at Barcelona or the UK or New York, Los Angeles and say, you know, it's similar. You guys have infrastructure here that they would dream of having, right? You guys can make decisions overnight. You know, you're not run by unions. It's like there's so many things that are different to the decision making in other places. So if your market is there, that's where you need to be thinking. And when you think about scale, it doesn't matter if you build something really cool that everybody wants here. If your scaling goes through other cities that are completely different than anything you imagined here.
Yeah, it's hard to follow up on that. I mean, I think Noam said it very, very well. It's really, so to answer your question, do we look for global big companies, or are we okay to back a founder who's just very regionally focused? Yeah, we're all looking for big outcomes and big markets. It's just very important, right? We want the $1 billion company and the $10 billion company and the $100 billion company. But it comes down to this sort of clarity and focus around, you know, what is your product, what is your market, what are you trying to achieve, what is the problem in the region that you're trying to solve. We're starting to see, for example, some Latin American founders now starting to come to the region because there's a lot of similarities between Latin America and the region. I think they've started in Turkey and they're coming down to the Middle East and maybe Egypt. So at some point when you, as a founder in a company, have made some progress in the region and have developed some real traction, you can potentially start exploring how you're going to scale. Now, that might not also apply to sort of insurtech or fintech or maybe software, where the productivity of software development is 10x what it used to be 5 years ago, and you're able to get customers from all over the world. But as long as there's real clarity, not just only on product, but also there's real clarity on strategy. And I just want to give one example that is really important around the difference between clarity on product and the clarity on strategy. So in the US, about 5 years ago, we got to know the CEO of DoorDash. And the CEO of DoorDash, obviously at that point, Uber Eats, was sort of the dominant food delivery player. But the product is the product. Ultimately, it's a marketplace. You're connecting to all the different restaurants or suppliers, and you have the buyers and you have the delivery. That's the product. But he had this very, very clear and focused strategy around why he needs to start with suburban markets. Because ultimately his premise and his thesis was the distance is much larger, potentially a bigger basket of goods and orders. People want to eat at home. If I can capture that market, I can get enough market share, I can develop the right operation rhythm, I can develop the right economics, and that would help me move into cities. We believe that that one strategy decision, one strategy design, ultimately led to DoorDash being the #1 food delivery marketplace in America. 5 years later, he's now expanding into Europe. So there's a product decision, there's a strategy, there's a sequencing around how you're thinking about your business. When we meet founders that say, our core market's in Pakistan, and right now we're expanding in South Africa and in Nigeria. Well, then there's follow-up questions around, well, how are these two markets similar? How are you able to address these problems in the same way? How are you able to scale and build team and build culture? How are you able to raise capital? Who are your investors? How are you thinking? How are they going to support you once you have some issues? So, it's not just single-minded, am I just targeting this market and everything else? There's all these different components that a founder has to constantly think about. I do also want to make one final comment of something that Noam said, which is, there is nothing more powerful, nothing more satisfying than when a founder sends a real honest, very honest reflection memo to his board and to his investors. It doesn't have to be 100 pages. It just could be 5 pages that says, during this month or during this quarter, we faced these issues, we had these successes, I'm struggling with this. We as investors, we're in the business of founder therapy. We are therapists to these founders. That's what we do, right? We have to never, ever, ever, when a founder reaches out, we have to respond, because founders are lonely. So that process of reflecting and writing it down and sharing it and being honest about your journey, there is nothing more troublesome than when you meet a founder and says, everything's great and here's the 10 things that are going right and I'm ready for my next round. Well, we know it's bullshit. It's all bullshit, because like Noam said, it's messy. Every day you're dying. Your company is dying every single. We know it. That's what we're in the business of, supporting you through that death. So that journey of being honest together on product, on strategy, on building your business, it's a very important journey between the investor and the founder. And the greatest investors and ultimately the greatest founders they back really get this right, this relationship.
Yeah. So as founders, what can be better than have an investor and a therapist? So it's a therapist that actually pays you to tell you stuff and doesn't go the other way. So I mean, it's perfect. But talking about kind of local versus global, maybe let's have 1 minute about Hub 71 and how do you see this? Because you guys founded it. How do you see this as part of your kind of global strategy, or the larger strategy of Mubadala? Why is it important? Is it to attract talent to here? Is it to take talent out? How do you see kind of the role of Hub 71 in kind of your strategy?
Yeah. So this is a question I get asked all the time, and it's a very, very, and it's evolving and it's changing with us. When we launched the ventures business, I remember back, everybody in Silicon Valley was like, oh, ventures local, ventures local, ventures local. Now ventures global. Everybody's like ventures global, ventures global. So, we also, VCs also tend to be schizo a bit in terms of what they want to do and how they invest. But yes, Hub 71 is a local-based community, but that is not what Hub 71 really is. At its core, we want to make this a global network of founders, of investors. COVID has enabled companies to rethink how you build engineering teams, where you put your people. So there's a physical component, because the physical community, we hope, helps founders share ideas and be together. It's also, it's a lonely job, so the opportunity for people to just share some physical space. But I think what COVID also pushed Hub 71 to really rethink its platform and its business for the long run, which is, how do you really associate yourself with this brand and this network and this community, not only just to raise capital, but maybe to help you expand into the market. I'll give you an example. We are investors in Hala. We actually got to know the Hala team, which is a Hub 71 company, from an Israeli investor. Okay, so an Israeli investor which came to Abu Dhabi, roamed the hallways and got to know the startups, invested in a Hub 71 startup, and then they told Mubadala, which ultimately said, oh wait, you invested in this InsurTech? We're looking at InsurTech. So it's not a local solution where we as Abu Dhabi investors should know all the Abu Dhabi based companies. It's just, I'm giving you this very simple example about how it's a network. And just like the internet, the greatest internet companies are networks. Hub 71, we hope to be a network where we can provide this platform for founders and for VCs. We want also this platform to be where founders can access the seed investors and the growth investors and the big sovereign investors. And they have questions about the market and they need some help opening doors about the region and the markets and what are the right regulators. So for us as the government, we also use this platform to help us think about how do we evolve our economic design, whether it's regulation and what's the right thing we're doing with education and healthcare and fintech. So it really becomes this, I call it this sort of springboard to really help develop a much stronger startup ecosystem. We got it right. I don't know, you should ask the founders and the VCs here. They probably know. They will give you a much more honest
you know
feedback.
what? Let's take this. So guys,
they're not going to say anything.
No.
Yeah, they're investors.
Let's see.
They better not.
Let's see. We're a very direct region, right? All of us. So, what do you want from Mubadala that you're not getting? Is there anything that Mubadala could do better for you founders? I hope I'm not embarrassing you.
No, yeah. I'd love to hear who's going to stand up and
come on, Hala Bros, come on. No. Yes,
stand up
someone.
and leave your tag on the
go
table.
for it. Dharma. Of course.
I need some therapy after that exchange with you. No, I guess for me the biggest question, and Ibrahim, maybe you answered. So, I'm Sharaf. I'm the CEO at Dharma, which is a travel brand as a service, is our buzzword. I guess for me it was just we came here. We moved our co-founding team from New York and Marrakesh to Abu Dhabi. We love it here, both our personal life and the way that I guess we've grown 10 years ahead through COVID. Had we stayed in Marrakesh where there is no ecosystem. Our question is, we're coming to the end of 2 years, and the question is really, what is the long-term vision coming out of the Hub 71 program? I'm not asking you, I'm just saying I think that's what's lacking is for some startups coming through this program, we create so much value. And then the question is, what is the incentive to keep this value within the Abu Dhabi ecosystem, if that is a goal? Because looking at a P&L post Hub 71 incentives, I don't think it would make sense for anyone defending a P&L at a startup level to stay in Abu Dhabi. Super
because it's
bluntly.
too expensive.
Yeah, I think so. And also, I think, the Abu Dhabi ecosystem is built this way. So, when I drop my kids off at school, they're with 95% people whose school is subsidized, whose housing is subsidized. So I think startups being at the bottom of the economic food chain here and being asked after the 2 years of incentive to then, pay for the marginal unsubsidized ecosystem cost makes less sense, I guess.
So where would you go?
I mean, for us, Barcelona, Lisbon, Madrid sounds like, again, thinking from a P&L perspective, thinking from a travel tech ecosystem perspective, I think those would be viable alternatives. Where would I rather go? I'd rather stay here. I'd rather grow the business from here. And so the question is, after these 2 years, is the goal of the business to bring 350 people here to see kind of like the incredible work that's being done, to experience Abu Dhabi, to experience the UAE, to experience the market, and then to go out and say, hey guys, we'll hold the Hub 71 flag as we grow and as we scale and as we go through hoops? Or is the goal to say, okay, well, we're going to stay here 2 years, graduate out of the program, and then build our base here? I think
listen, it's...
Sorry, Ibrahim, I didn't mean to...
No, it's a very good question, and it's a very good point, and it's a design question that we as Hub 71, Mubadala, Abu Dhabi, are still grappling with. Our hope is that when we launched this program in 2018, yes, we put these incentive programs because we believed it was right to put incentives just to start to attract some of these startups, and I think we did that with examples. But long term, our plan is that are we offering you more than just these incentives? Whether it's an access to a venture capital community that potentially could engage with you, access to markets, access to talent, that would in many ways make it well worth for you to address the financial implications of keeping people here, right? So it might not work with your startup, but over a prolonged period of time, we want the design to be much more about value creation and enablement versus providing subsidies, rent subsidies or housing subsidies or financial subsidies. I'm not saying these subsidies should go away. I'm not a proponent that subsidies should completely go away. But what you will start seeing here is where the value proposition is not free rent and free housing. There has to be more around building a long-term sustainable ecosystem. And I think these are the things that are being evaluated, and obviously not mutually exclusive from the challenges that you face. And I don't know if we're going to get it right. Our hope is that we get it right, but we want to get it right working with startups like you.
And by the way, you know what I learned from this is that investors are neurotics, but all of us founders, we're all masochists. So I promise you're going to stay here with all the problems anyway, because we're always looking for the hard work and the hard way. But pointing on what Ibrahim said, the real value of Hub 71 is all of you guys together. It's the community. I can tell you, if you look at the Israeli ecosystem, okay, I could probably there's an Israeli probably in every single Silicon Valley company, and ask Noam how many times Israelis have called him. He doesn't even know where they are or who they are, and they call him and say, "Hey, you're Israeli. You have to help me." This is what you guys have to create. You have to create this alumni, okay, that helps each other. That's not going to come from the top. That's going to come from you talking to each other, getting together, have a WhatsApp, whatever, and start helping each other. Because all of you are going to found companies. Some of them are going to go big. Some of those companies are going to be, acquired by the Facebooks and the Googles of the world. And if you're part of this alumni, you should be able to get on the phone or send a message to another alumni of Hub 71. Once you do that, Hub 71 will be the most valuable thing you've gone through. There's a reason people go to Stanford, for the alumni. There's a reason people go to such things. You have this privilege. They've given you this platform. Okay, I'm telling you as a founder, don't look at them to do that. You have to do that. This is the community. If you do that, this is going to be invaluable. If you don't do that, it's going to be an incentive program. Is that really what you need? And probably not.
I would add to that. We've been talking a lot about how can we get more kind of talent or experience to come through here to share with everyone else. But one of the things I think you're missing out on is, there's several organizations in Israel that are really about connecting Israeli entrepreneurs all over the world, wherever they are. The Indians in Silicon Valley have an organization that connects Indian entrepreneurs, and today Indians run every tech company in the world. The Chinese have it. The French, the European, multiple of these networks.
We're terrible at doing that.
There's no Arab network that I know of.
You should have it.
And when you think about it, there are Arabs working in every company you can imagine, in every position you can imagine, who've gone through what you're going through, but are sitting in Silicon Valley at Google right now, right? And they would love to help you, right? They would. Just reaching out. You invite them here, they'll come. There's this ethos in Silicon Valley, and I think in tech in general, of people, we wear t-shirts because we don't have to wear suits, right? We can be nice to each other. We don't have to be assholes, right? It's okay, right? And people take that seriously. Like, you reach out blindly to someone at a company, they will respond. But I think juicing it up would be very interesting, and with Hub 71 kind of at the center of it, and building that network, tap into them. There are very few people know about what's going on here right now, but a lot of the people that you want to know care about what's going on here.
I think, listen, my final point here is, I hope you don't leave, because Hub 71 and beyond Hub 71, there's a real commitment. It's real, it's serious, it's long-term, that Abu Dhabi has made technology its fundamental economic pillar for the next 50 years. Right? How do we take this very wealthy state, this very wealthy nation that is based on energy, and really pivot that to one that's based on technology, innovation, and impact? There is real serious commitment. And I think there's been a lot of case studies and examples now that demonstrates that commitment. That line is not going to be straight. We cannot do it without the founders. And we're not going to get all the pieces straight. But if you do have an exceptional company and the right product, and you have a clear strategy, and you're building the right team, and you're building the right culture, and you have a global network, but have some presence in Abu Dhabi and can rely and potentially succeed by being a partner to Abu Dhabi, then we want you here. We want to be partners with you. But it's not us versus the world. We know you cannot build a global software company just being, not everybody's going to be here and that's it. We know you're going to be everywhere. We understand that. Most of the US startups that we fund today do not have engineering teams in the US. 90% of them do not have engineering teams in the US. So, and that's just over the past 5 years, the shift has been unbelievable. So we recognize that you're going to have, engineering capabilities and go-to-market and operations in different parts of the world. We understand that's what makes the company you're building special.
Let's take another question. Go ahead.
Hi, Mohammed from Swiftbox. We're a company building a platform for crowdsourcing logistics to help e-commerce retailers with faster deliveries. My question is, so you touched on investors and the relationships between founders and investors, and you talked about having kind of the wrong investors on board. Can you just comment on forming the board, on how did you go about thinking about forming the board, and what kind of things you want to look for in terms of what kind of board members you want to have on board for early stage startups?
So I'm not a very good representative for that question because I've been terrible at building my board.
Okay, I'll say it. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I've been really bad at it. And so my perspective is there are people that I know that have very good boards, and it's a pleasure. Right? I didn't. So I don't know what it takes to build a good board. I can tell you a lot about what it takes to build a bad board. But I will say that one of the problems I've seen with early stage founders a lot of times is that they have inflated expectations of their board. They kind of think that the board's going to tell them what to do. They're doing something because the board said so, right? At the end of the day, the board can fire you. That's all they can do. There's nothing else they can do. Everything else is completely, you're on your own, okay? They're there to help you. You can get feedback from them, whatever, but don't expect them to lead the company, okay? And so expect them to be whatever resource you need and to help you in their experience, but in leaning too hard on your board is a sign of weakness, okay? And I think the best entrepreneurs know how to keep the board informed, they know how to get things from the board that they need, but they also know how to set an arm's length relationship that, it's on me. I'm not going to ask you what I should do. I'm going to tell you what I want to do, and I want to hear your feedback. And I want to discuss with you what I'm going to do. But I'm not going to ask you what to do because you've spent 10 minutes on my company this month, and I've spent every waking moment, right? So there is that relation that has to be built. And it requires two things. It requires the founder to understand the boundaries and to be communicative and to be transparent with the board and to listen. Again, very few founders actually listen. But being coachable is super important because board members have a lot of experience. The flip side requires the board members to understand their role as well. One of the problems that I have when I sit on boards is that I really want to get into the details, but that's not my role. I've got to hold myself back. But no, don't show me the wireframes. I'm dying to see them, but don't show them to me because that's not my role as a board member. So understanding your role in this dynamic is super important, setting the expectation for both sides. In general, like with everything, it's the quality of the people. Make sure that your board are people that you would like to take a 14-hour flight with sitting next to them, okay? That you would love to have that conversation with them, that you trust them, that they trust you, the kind of people you'd want to go out with, and that you want to be part of their lives and they're part of your lives, right? Like you're thinking about recruiting and the kind of people you want to go back to culture, right? You want the same culture with your board, and at the end of the day, it's about the people, right? You get the right people there, it doesn't really matter the role. The right people can work together. And a board that works as a team, like I said, a small focused team, nothing can stop them, same thing with the board. Small focused board that's all pulling in the same direction can propel a company. A board where everyone's going in a different direction, Waze almost went bankrupt because of our board. Literally, we had 3 weeks of cash because of some historical problem with our board. It doesn't matter what the details are. But the point is, it can be on that level. It can be a death in March for you. And at the same time, when you have the right board, it can, you've got people on your side that are rooting with you, that are supporting you, who've seen it before. One of my board members, John Malloy from Blue Run Ventures, was exactly that. He was an early stage investor in PayPal. So he saw what happened to PayPal, how it grew, and the mess. And whenever I thought that I was managing the worst company in the world, he told me other stories about very famous people and about what they went through. And so it can be that relationship as well, but it's the quality of the people.
Nothing to add there.
Yeah, I mean,
it's you have to listen. You're the leader. I think Noam said boards are too infrequent and too polite. Everybody's the investors they're all showing up in their Teslas, and we made these investments, and we VCs tend to have this delusional sense of success because we make investments, but actually the success doesn't show up in like 10 years. But the fact that we made the investments, we all think we're like very smart. So we all show up, and mostly it's but you have to lead the board. It's like here's the agenda. Here's the 5 things I'm going to cover. Board members should obviously be prepared. They should listen a lot more than speak. I've been on boards that board members have been destructive because they're not listening. They're not really contributing. But so ultimately, the founder and the CEO has to run the board and lead the board specifically around what your expectations, what are you looking for, what's the outcome of the board, and obviously gauge and sense the dynamics. And the makeup of the board is very, very important. I agree with that. So you have to be very, very thoughtful. You're not going to get it right every single time, but who's your investor and how you compose that board. Maybe you bring an outsider too to help you versus just the investors to really help you think through the industry dynamics, or somebody who's been through ups and downs to be kind of the voice of reason or wisdom. So it's there's a lot of resources now to kind of help you. It's an art, but it's a very, very important one. As your company scales, and making sure how that board evolves with you and grows with you becomes a key to your success. And we've had many situations now where our successful companies, really the quality of the board is just instrumental.
And just one thing, I had a mentor by the name of Jim Manzi. He was the guy who founded Lotus Notes, sold it to IBM, the first big deal, and it was a board.
I don't think anybody here knows both companies, Lotus Notes or IBM.
Big companies at the time. And he always told me, look, the board, the way you have to treat a board, it's a sounding board. And the only thing the board can really give you is perspective. And it can tell you, this is the way you think, it might be this way. It's always your decision, but they can give you perspective. And the second thing he said is, if you need real feedback, you need to put the work in. And that, I think, is also what Noam said and what Ibrahim said is, those notes that explain what you're going through. if you want real feedback, you have to say what really goes in. And it's all about building a relationship. You have to put the time in doing that. I'm telling you, everyone, we all know what we need to do, but we need to have the strength to actually do that. I mean, on myself, we are committed to this region. We've been here how many? 8 times in the last year. You have to commit. You want to do something, you have to commit, you have to build a relationship, and you have to just do what you guys know what needs to be done. I promise you, everybody knows what needs to be done. Just have to go and do it. Sorry for my words. I didn't mean that. So please, Hannah.
Walid here from Hala Insurance. Just I have a couple of things. First one is a comment on Hub 71, and the second one is a question on culture. Without taking too much time, my comment on Hub 71, really when we showed up here was not mainly for the incentive, that was a cherry on top, but to me was thinking of something that is similar to a Y Combinator in the Middle East. And the time has almost passed for our incentive with regards to the rent and with regards to the office space and all of these things. But really what we try to focus on as much as we can, kind of like you said, is building that ecosystem. So Badr, who's I think in toilet break right now, but whenever I had an argument with my co-founder, my brother, I would just go talk to Badr. I'm not going to talk about it with my investors. I'm not going to talk about it with other people. And if I want to look for a sounding board on what's a good KPI to consider, I would ask someone from over there. I could have kind of peer-to-peer coaching with some of the other co-founders in the room here and really understand from their ecosystems in logistics, like Muhammad here, or someone who works in investment over there, to really understand how I can cross-sell to them and work with them. When I use Y Combinator as an example, today Y Combinator and Stripe, for example, any company that comes in Y Combinator by default use Stripe as their payment gateway. And really, I guess to me, Abu Dhabi, this is exactly what I want to do, wherein any company that comes in through Hub 71 would insure through Hala, or Hala would use a smart crowd as their investment choice. That is the only way to kind of push from there. And just like you said, have a global network of Arabs or foreigners as well, because half of us, not all of us are Arabs here, but residents in the UAE kind of collaborate with each other. Putting that aside though, my question on culture, guys, is as a startup that's just jumped out of the precipice of seed stage into growth or potentially, hopefully, hyper growth, we've got our people and culture manager here, Zain. You've talked heavily on culture. How do you maintain or grow your culture when the size of your company is almost doubling month on month in terms of the people in it? How important is a comparison between someone who's amazing at product versus someone who you like a lot and can learn to do product? So again, taking into account scaling very quickly the number of people. This is a question by Zain, but she's just too shy to ask it. So you guys can look at Zain and answer.
So first of all, we have this theme about books. So Blitz Scaling by, have you read that?
I've read.
One of my biggest mistakes is not reading Blitz Scaling in time. It wasn't published, but in being too loyal to my employees. Now that sounds like a contradiction, right? One of the things Blitz Scaling talks about is this idea of a company being a family, a village, a city, a country, a state, right? There are different stages you go through, and every stage you need different people. Some people can scale through all the stages. Most people are great at a specific stage. And when you look at the fact that they were successful at that stage as an indication they're going to be successful at the next stage, in spite of the facts, you're not helping anyone. You're not really helping them because they're failing every day at their job. They're just not great at it. You're not helping their peers who look at them like, this person doesn't know, what they're doing, and you're not helping the company. You're helping your own ego. This person was with you from day one. They helped you. They gave their guts and their blood and sweat and tears for this. They did everything right. The company needed them and depended on them. But that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is right now what do you need. And the Netflix culture doc, which is a famous doc, which everybody should read, they talk about themselves very much as a sports team, right? And I think the Shopify CEO sent a similar letter lately. You can find it online. A sports team are brothers in arms, right? They're together, etc. But if you break your ankle, you're out the next day. It doesn't matter that you won it and you brought them to a championship last year and you were great. Right now, you're not playing as well, you're never going to recover from your ankle, you're out. And both sides know that, right? Now, you need to treat these people very well. You need to help them. It's better to let them sit on a salary at home than to have them have a job in the company that they're not good at. Because when people do a job they're not good at, they hire people that are, B players, hire C players, and the whole cycle breaks down. The damage to the team, right? The individual should not matter as much as the team, especially early stage startups. And the damage one person who's not as good as everyone else does to the team is crazy. Because everyone on the team looks at you. Why are you keeping this person? Because they like you? Because you like them? Because they're friends of yours? And that's how politics begins. Oh, so that's why you didn't like my design, because I'm not friendly with you, and you liked his. And like all those non-product issues come out. And as an early stage company, the product is everything. One of the advantages you have, there's complete alignment between the investors, the management, the founders, the employees, the success of the product. It's very different in a corporation. It's very different in a multinational. I mean, but in a startup, that alignment is key. And anyone who is not helping the product move at this stage, what they did in the past doesn't matter. So I would say you're about to hit some of the worst days of your life, okay? Just so you can have something optimistic to look forward to. You're going to constantly have to, especially when you accelerate fast, you're going to constantly have to evaluate the people you have in the roles, and you're constantly going to have to either give them a different role to try out, or turn them into an IC, or say goodbye to them. And obviously, it's important to say goodbye nicely because everyone's looking at them as what's going to happen to me. So you've got to do the right thing. And they did the right thing. The worst thing you can do is you leave them and you bring someone else. You start creating these different titles. And, well, my management team is 53 people now. And I've got a VP and an SVP and a director. And simplicity. Yep. You cannot complicate an org structure around that because everyone sees. The culture is that. Yep. People see that you're letting this person stay because you like them or because of the past or because he's your brother or whatever reason. No, just not personal. But I would say, whatever the reason is, if that's why the person's there, it doesn't matter what you say. People see through it. Everyone knows what's going on. Yeah. And it's about you and the team. Put the team ahead of everything, ahead of yourself.
We have to wrap up. Ibrahim?
To that question specifically, or
yeah, and then I think we're out of time. So
listen, I think you as the founder are, because you started this company, you've made a personal commitment to get on this journey, and you've made a personal commitment. You've made a commitment to your investors that you're going to build this company. So you're going to have to, in every interaction, in every meeting, in every decision. You are an energy giver. So you have to go figure out what's going to, how you're going to refill your energy personally. I don't know how you do it, whether you exercise or you take a walk or you read or you travel or you spend time with your loved ones. There's got to be a method for you for how you refill your energy. But how you show up to every single interaction is going to define the principles and the culture of your firm. How you start your meetings, how you wrap up your meetings, how you shun debate, how you promote debate. Ultimately, when there's conflicting ideas, how you make that decision. Every interaction is going to, and when you make a mistake, you actually say, listen, I made a mistake. I'm human, I made a mistake. I'm going to fix it. But I want to hear from you. This is a mistake that I made. So you just have to be ready 24/7 to be an energy giver. That's how you're going to build your culture. And the greatest firms the founders have really done that. So you have to also, how am I going to replenish this energy that I'm spending? If you don't give energy, you're not going to get there. It's not going to, ultimately, you're going to face too much resistance, too much headwinds that you'll break. So that's an important part of how you create the culture and the long-term sustainability of the company. It's really, really sensitive.
Yeah, so I think what both my friends here said is you lead by example. It's not easy because every single moment everybody looks at you. The size of the market everybody knows. How you're going to situate yourself, how you're going to behave, that's what drives the culture. I want to thank Ibrahim and Jida and the team for hosting Noam and myself here. We feel very privileged to be here. I think you guys are building something unbelievable. Hopefully we'll be able to be part of this. Thank you for spending an hour and a half with us. That's basically it. I think it's a wrap up.
Thank you for bringing it on.